Okay, gotta address the elephant in the room. Trump back in the White House? Crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here we are. You guys sent in two sources dealing with, well, this new reality. A pretty unsettling piece from the New Yorker, and then a more strategic take from Seth Abramson's Proof Substack. One's like, red alert. The other saying, okay, what now?
Mhm.
I gotta say, I'm somewhere between shocked and, like, can't believe this is happening. What about you?
Yeah, no, it's wild to see these two reactions, side by side. Like the New Yorker piece, it starts by taking us back to 2016. That morning after Trump's first win, they paint this really stark image, funeral mood in the White House, Obama trying to, I guess, comfort his staff. And they say he was even privately wondering if America was even ready for progress.
Wow. It's such a vivid scene, really sets the tone for the whole article. And they don't hold back when it comes to describing Trump himself. They call him a mix of George Wallace, Hulk Hogan, and Father Charles Coughlin.
Mm.
What a combo.
It is, isn't it? I think that's exactly what they're going for. This jarring image that really highlights, how they see Trump, like he's a threat to democratic norms. And then they go on to list some really concerning policies that a second Trump administration might enact. Things like mass deportations, a weakened NATO, and a full-on assault on the press.
Okay, that's where I start to freak out a little, especially the part about a Supreme Court packed with what they call reactionary judges. What does that even mean, and why is it so concerning?
Yeah, so reactionary, in this context, it refers to judges who tend to interpret the law in a way that's trying to, like, reverse social progress, often favoring traditional values and hierarchies. The concern is that a Supreme Court dominated by these judges could overturn landmark decisions on issues like abortion, same-sex marriage, affirmative action, basically rolling back decades of legal precedent.
So the stakes are really high here.
Yes.
The article even compares Trump's victory to the rise of, like, authoritarian leaders, Putin, Orban, suggesting that American democracy itself is in jeopardy.
Yeah, that's the core of their argument, that this isn't just about disagreeing with a president's policies, it's about the potential erosion of democratic institutions and values.
Heavy stuff. And the article ends with this quote from Václav Havel. There is only one thing I will not concede, that it might be meaningless to strive in a good cause.
It's a powerful message, but honestly, after reading that article, it's hard not to feel a sense of despair.
Yeah, I get it. It's a bleak picture they paint.
Yeah.
But this is where the contrast with Seth Abramson's piece gets really interesting. He actually predicted Trump's rise to power, so he's coming at this from a totally different angle.
Yeah, you mentioned he's a Trump biographer. What insights did he have back then that maybe others miss? What makes him such a keen observer of this whole phenomenon? Well, Abramson has a background in both law and journalism, and he really digs into the details, focusing on things like court filings, financial disclosures, and obscure legal precedents. This allowed him to see patterns and connections that other people just completely overlooked. In his book, he argued that Trump's entire career has been a series of calculated risks and legal maneuvers designed to protect his wealth and power, often at the expense of others.
So he's not just some commentator. He's someone who spent years studying Trump's, tactics and mindset. That gives his perspective a lot of weight, especially now.
For sure. And in his proof post, he's pushing back against the idea that the election was stolen. He argues that focusing on that is counterproductive and that Democrats need to move past denial and understand how Trump won if they want to, be effective going forward.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of his argument. What evidence does he use to debunk the claims of a stolen election? Because I'm sure a lot of people are clinging to that right now.
He points to several factors. First, he notes that the nationwide increase in Trump's vote share, even in states he lost, suggests a genuine surge in support, not just isolated irregularities. Second, he highlights the fact that Democrats were actually successful in other races, like the House and Senate. He argues that if the election had been rigged on a large scale, as some claim, it wouldn't make sense for these other races to have gone the Democrats' way.
That's a really good point. It seems like people are focusing on the presidential race in isolation without considering the broader electoral landscape.
And that's exactly what Abramson is trying to do, broaden the perspective, encourage a more nuanced analysis of the situation.
So if he's saying the election wasn't stolen, then what's his explanation for how Trump won? Is it just that more people genuinely support him now?
He acknowledges that there was a real increase in support for Trump, but he also argues that there were other factors at play that go beyond just shifting political preferences.
Like what?
Well, he makes this really interesting point about the right-wing disinformation machine and its impact on voters.
Wait, before we get into that, can we back up for a sec? For those of us who aren't, political science experts, what exactly does he mean by disinformation machine? What does that look like?
That's a great question. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it's important to unpack it.
Mhm.
Essentially, it refers to this coordinated effort to spread false or misleading information, often through social media and partisan media outlets, with the aim of influencing public opinion and shaping political outcomes.
Okay, so how does Abramson connect this disinformation machine to Trump's victory?
He argues that this machine has been super effective at flooding the information ecosystem with propaganda and conspiracy theories, particularly targeting demographics that are already, susceptible to Trump's messaging. He believes that many voters went to the polls with little to no accurate information about the candidates or their policies, making them more likely to vote based on emotion or misinformation.
So it's not just about people changing their minds or switching their political allegiances. It's about people being deliberately misled and manipulated by a system that's designed to exploit their fears and biases.
That's a key part of his argument. And he doesn't shy away from the implications. He's basically saying that the right's control of the information landscape is a direct threat to democratic processes because it undermines the very foundation of informed decision-making.
That's a pretty chilling thought. It makes me wonder, are there specific examples of how this disinformation machine works? Can we see it in action?
There are countless examples, but one that Abramson highlights in his post is the spread of conspiracy theories about election fraud. He points to the way these theories were amplified through social media, partisan media outlets, and even by some elected officials, creating this feedback loop that made it really difficult for voters to distinguish fact from fiction.
So it's not just about, individual voters being gullible or uninformed. It's about a systemic effort to erode trust in democratic institutions and so chaos and confusion.
Precisely. And Abramson argues that this is a tactic that's been used repeatedly throughout history, often with, devastating consequences. He's drawing parallels between what's happening now and the rise of authoritarian regimes in other parts of the world where the control of information is often the first step towards consolidating power.
This is all starting to feel very, very Orwellian.
Mm.
But if Abramson's right, and this disinformation machine is so powerful, is there anything we can do to combat it?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's one that we'll need to explore further. But before we get into potential solutions, I think it's important to fully understand, how big this problem is.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like Abramson have a lot more to say on this topic. He also brought up something in his post about a disconnect between voters supporting Democratic policies but not voting for Democratic candidates. Can you explain what he meant by that?
Sure. He uses the example of ballot initiatives on abortion rights, which actually passed in several states that also voted for Trump. His point is that some voters might support progressive policies in principle, but they may not necessarily see the Democratic Party as the best vehicle for achieving those goals.
So it's not just about policy preferences. It's about something else.
Yeah.
Maybe a lack of trust in the Democratic Party itself or a perception that they're out of touch with the concerns of everyday people.
Exactly. And this is something that Democrats are going to have to grapple with if they want to, win back voters who have drifted towards Trump.
Yeah.
They need to understand why some people might support their policies on paper, but still choose to vote for the other side.
It's like there's this gap between what people say they believe in and how they actually vote. And that gap is where the disinformation machine thrives. It's
Yeah.
able to exploit those inconsistencies and manipulate people's emotions to drive them towards certain candidates or outcomes, even if those candidates don't actually represent their best interests.
That's a really insightful way to put it. It's not just about misinformation. It's about exploiting pre-existing anxieties, resentments, and biases to create this sense of division and distrust that benefits those in power.
So we're dealing with a much deeper problem than just factual inaccuracy. It's about a fundamental breakdown in trust and a manipulation of people's emotions for political gain.
Yeah. That's right. And this brings us back to Abramson's core argument. Denial won't help. understanding how W. Trump won is crucial to moving forward. He's basically saying, okay, we lost this round. Now let's figure out what went wrong so we can come back stronger.
He sounds almost optimistic, despite everything. It's a stark contrast to the despair of the New Yorker piece.
Mhm.
So where do we go from here? We've got these two very different perspectives, one filled with alarm, the other urging a more strategic approach. What resonates most with you?
It's a critical moment where we need to balance a clear-eyed assessment of the situation, like the one the New Yorker offers, with a refusal to give in to despair, which is what Abramson's advocating for. What resonates most with you?
Honestly, I'm still processing everything. I think you're right. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging the very real threats we face and finding ways to move forward without succumbing to fear and paralysis. And maybe that starts by listening to what people like Abramson have to say.
Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? We're faced with this unsettling reality, and now we have to figure out how to respond. Do we give in to the fear and despair like in the New Yorker piece, or do we try to find a way forward like Abrams suggests?
It feels like we're being pulled in two different directions. I can't ignore the very real threat of a second Trump term.
Hmm.
I mean, we just talked about the potential consequences for the Supreme Court and democratic norms. But I also know that dwelling on the what ifs and getting stuck in denial won't help anyone.
You've hit the nail on the head. Both of these sources are trying to convey that in different ways. The New Yorker it's a warning. It's a stark reminder of what's at stake if we become complacent.
It's a wake-up call for sure. I mean, they paint a pretty grim picture of what a second Trump term could look like. Mass deportations, a Supreme Court packed with reactionary judges, the erosion of democratic norms. It's hard not to feel overwhelmed.
And that feeling is completely valid. But remember, fear can be paralyzing. It can prevent us from taking action, from finding ways to resist, to fight for the values we believe in. That's where Abramson's argument comes in. He's urging us to channel our anger and frustration into something productive.
So instead of getting bogged down in conspiracy theories about stolen elections, we should focus on understanding how and why Trump won. I mean, is that even possible at this point?
Abramson seems to think so. He argues that understanding the factors that led to Trump's victory, things like the right-wing disinformation machine, the disconnect between policy preferences and voting behavior, is crucial to developing, effective strategies for the future.
It's like you say, okay, we lost this round, but let's figure out what went wrong so we can come back stronger. But how do we even begin to unpack all of that?
He offers some concrete examples in his post. Remember his point about how ballot initiatives on abortion rights might have inadvertently helped Trump. Some voters who support reproductive rights may have felt that those initiatives address their concerns at the state level, making it easier for them to vote for Trump, despite his stance on the issue.
That's a really interesting point. It really highlights the complexity of voter behavior and the need to understand the nuances of how people make decisions in the voting booth. I never thought of it that way.
It's a good reminder that we can't just assume that voters will automatically align with the party that best represents their policy preferences. We need to dig deeper and understand the motivations and anxieties that are driving their choices.
So it's about more than just having the right policies. It's about understanding the electorate, recognizing the power of disinformation, and finding ways to cut through the noise.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing the challenges we face, but refusing to give in to despair. It's about finding that balance between a clear-eyed assessment of the situation and a determination to keep striving for a better future.
It's like we need to acknowledge the darkness, but also remember that darkness doesn't have to be the end of the story.
That's a powerful way to put it. And I think it brings us back to that quote from Václav Havel. There is only one thing I will not concede, that it might be meaningless to strive in a good cause.
Yeah.
Even in the face of what feels like an insurmountable challenge, even when we're surrounded by darkness, there's still a spark of hope. There's still a possibility for positive change.
It's like even if we can't change the outcome of this election, we can still choose how we respond to it. We can choose to fight for the values we believe in, to resist the forces that seek to divide us, to work towards a more just and equitable future.
And that choice, that active resistance, that commitment to striving for a good cause is what ultimately defines us, both individually and as a society.
Okay, so we've explored these two very different perspectives on a second Trump term. One filled with alarm and a sense of impending doom. The other urging a more pragmatic, strategic approach. But where do we go from here? What does it actually look like to strive in a good cause in this moment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that we'll need to grapple with individually and collectively in the days, weeks, and months to come. But I think these two sources offer some valuable starting points for that conversation.
I agree. They've given us a lot to think about. But I have to say I'm still struggling with this idea of a disinformation machine.
Mhm.
It feels so big and overwhelming. Is there anything we can actually do as individuals to combat it?
That's a great question, and I think it's important to remember that we're not powerless in the face of this challenge. There are things we can do, both individually and collectively, to push back against disinformation and promote a more informed and engaged citizenry.
Like, what? Give me some examples. I'm ready to take action.
Well, for starters, we can become more critical consumers of information. We can question the sources of our news, be wary of sensationalized headlines and emotionally charged content, and seek out diverse perspectives.
So it's about being more mindful of what we're reading and sharing and not just accepting everything at face value.
Exactly. It's about developing our media literacy skills and becoming more discerning consumers of information. We can also support organizations that are working to combat disinformation and promote fact checking and media accountability. There are a lot of great groups out there doing this important work.
That's a good point. I know I've seen some fact-checking websites and initiatives popping up in recent years. It's encouraging to see people pushing back against the tide of misinformation.
And we can also engage in constructive conversations with people in our lives who might be susceptible to disinformation. It's not about lecturing or shaming them, but about having open and honest dialogues, sharing credible sources, and encouraging critical thinking.
That can be tough though, right? Especially when you're dealing with people who are deeply entrenched in their beliefs.
It's definitely not always easy, but it's important to remember that these are often, people we care about, and that they're not necessarily malicious or intentionally spreading falsehoods. They might just be misinformed or vulnerable to manipulation.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the anger and frustration, but it's important to approach these conversations with empathy and understanding.
Exactly. And remember, even if we can't change someone's mind overnight, planting a seed of doubt or introducing a new perspective can make a difference in the long run.
It's like that saying, "Be the change you want to see in the world."
Hmm.
If we want a more informed and engaged society, we need to start by being more informed and engaged ourselves, and by having those tough conversations with the people around us.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to another important point that Abramson makes in his post, the need to understand how Trump won. He argues that focusing on the mechanics of the election, the strategies that were employed, the demographics that were targeted can help us develop, more effective counter strategies in the future.
So it's not just about fighting disinformation. It's about understanding how the game is being played, so to speak, and figuring out how to play it better.
Exactly. And that requires a deep dive into things like campaign finance, voter turnout, and the way political messages are crafted and disseminated.
It sounds like we've got a lot more unpacking to do. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of campaign strategy,
Hmm.
I want to go back to something we touched on earlier. The disconnect between policy preferences and voting behavior. What can we learn from that, and how can we bridge that gap?
That's a crucial question, and I think it's one that Democrats have been struggling with for a while. They need to understand why some voters might support their policies on paper, but still choose to vote for the other side. And I think part of the answer lies in the way those policies are communicated and framed.
So it's not just about having the right ideas, it's about how you sell those ideas to the public.
Exactly. And it's about understanding the emotional anxieties and aspirations that are driving voter behavior.
That's like, wait.
Well, for example, there's a lot of talk about economic anxiety and the sense that many people are being left behind by globalization and technological change. Trump has been very effective at tapping into that anxiety and framing himself as the champion of the forgotten working class.
But his policies often seem to contradict that message. I mean, his tax cuts mostly benefit the wealthy, and his trade wars have hurt many American businesses and workers.
You're right, but the point is that the perception often matters more than the reality, especially in politics. Trump has been very successful at creating a narrative that resonates with people's fears and frustrations, even if the facts don't always support that narrative.
So it's about storytelling, about creating a narrative that connects with people on an emotional level, even if it's not entirely accurate or truthful.
That's a big part of it, and it's something that Democrats often struggle with. They tend to focus on the policy details, the facts and figures, but they often fail to connect with voters on a more visceral level.
It's like they're speaking to people's heads, but not their hearts.
That's a good way to put it, and I think it's something they need to work on if they want to win back voters who have been swayed by Trump's emotional appeals.
So it's about finding a way to communicate, progressive values and policies in a way that resonates with people's hopes and fears, their aspirations and anxieties.
Exactly. It's about tapping into the emotional core of what it means to be an American,
Yeah.
and showing how progressive policies can create a better future for everyone, not just a select few.
It sounds like a tall order, but I think it's an important challenge, and it's one that we can all play a role in. We can all be part of that conversation, that effort to bridge the gap between policy and people, between facts and feelings.
I agree. It's not just about politicians and campaigns. It's about all of us finding ways to connect with each other, to build bridges of understanding and empathy, and to work together to create a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so we've talked about the need to combat disinformation, to understand the mechanics of the election, and to bridge the gap between policy and people. What else can we learn from Abramson's post?
Well, he also touches on something that's often overlooked in political discussions,
Yeah.
the importance of hope.
Hope. That seems like a pretty tall order right now, given everything we've been talking about.
I know it might sound, naive or idealistic, but I think Abramson is onto something here. He argues that without hope, without a belief that things can get better, we're more likely to give in to despair and cynicism, which ultimately benefits those in power.
So it's not just about being realistic about the challenges we face. It's about maintaining a sense of optimism, a belief that we can make a difference.
Exactly. And that hope can be a powerful motivator. It can fuel our activism, our engagement, our willingness to fight for a better future.
It's like that saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. If we let fear paralyze us, if we lose hope, then we've already lost the battle.
I think that's a powerful way to put it. We need to find that balance between acknowledging the darkness and holding on to the light, between recognizing the challenges and believing in the possibility of change.
Okay, so we've got a lot to think about here. We've got disinformation to combat, elections to analyze, bridges to build, and hope to cultivate. It's a lot, but it's also incredibly inspiring. I'm starting to see how these two very different sources, the New Yorker and Abramson's proof post, can actually work together to guide us through this difficult moment.
That's exactly what we're aiming for. By looking at these contrasting perspectives, we can gain a more nuanced understanding of the challenges we face and the potential paths forward.
So what's the next step in this deep dive? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it would be helpful to delve deeper into some of the specific strategies that Abramson outlines in his post. He talks about the need to rebuild trust in democratic institutions, to invest in voter education and mobilization, and to develop more effective messaging that resonates with the emotional anxieties of the electorate.
That sounds like a plan. Let's break it down.
Okay, so Abramson says we need to rebuild trust in democratic institutions. I mean, after years of attacks and erosion of norms, where do we even begin?
It's a huge task for sure. But Abramson suggests focusing on concrete actions rather than these abstract ideals. He talks about the importance of transparency and accountability, like pushing for reforms that make government more open and responsive to the needs of its citizens.
Yeah, things like campaign finance reform, lobbying restrictions, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Those are the types of policies that can help restore people's faith in the system. It's about showing that government can actually work for them, not just for, special interests or the wealthy elite.
I see how that would be a powerful message,
Yeah.
especially for those who feel disillusioned and left behind by the current political system.
And Abramson also, he emphasizes the importance of investing in voter education and mobilization. He argues that a more informed and engaged electorate is essential for a healthy democracy.
But how do we reach people who have been bombarded with disinformation and have lost trust in traditional sources of information?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Abramson suggests that we need to meet people where they are. He talks about the need to use, innovative approaches and platforms to reach voters, particularly, young people and those who are disengaged from the political process.
So things like social media campaigns, targeted outreach programs, maybe even working with influencers or celebrities who have a large following.
Exactly. Those are the types of strategies that can help, cut through the noise and connect with people on their own terms.
Yeah.
It's about making, civic engagement more accessible and appealing. Not just a duty, but something that's relevant to their lives.
I like that framing. It's about showing people that their voices matter and that they can actually make a difference.
And finally, Abramson, he stresses the importance of developing more effective messaging that resonates with the emotional anxieties of the electorate. He argues that Democrats need to move beyond, wonky policy debates and connect with voters on a deeper level.
I think you touched on this earlier. It's about speaking to people's hearts, not just their heads.
Exactly. It's about understanding the hopes, fears, and aspirations that are driving, voter behavior and crafting messages that speak to those emotions.
So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it.
Precisely. It's about framing our arguments in a way that is relatable and compelling. It's about telling stories that connect with people's, lived experiences and offer a vision of a better future.
It's like we need to become better storytellers. We need to paint a picture of a future that people can believe in and get excited about.
That's a great way to put it. We need to offer a narrative of hope and progress, a narrative that resonates with people's deepest values and inspires them to take action.
Okay, I'm starting to get it, but I have to be honest. I'm still feeling a little overwhelmed. All of this sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's also incredibly, incredibly important work. And it's work that we can all participate in. We can all be part of the solution.
So where do we start? What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Well, we can start by, educating ourselves about the issues and engaging in constructive conversations with our friends, family, and communities. We can support organizations that are working to promote democracy and combat disinformation. We can volunteer our time and resources to campaigns and causes that align with our values. And most importantly, we can never give up hope.
That's a powerful message. never give up hope. Even in the face of adversity, even when things seem bleak, there's always reason to believe that a better future is possible.
Absolutely. And I think that's the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive. We may not have control over the outcome of every election, but we do have control over our own actions and our own beliefs. And by choosing hope, by choosing to engage, by choosing to fight for what we believe in, we can make a difference.
I love that. Choosing hope, choosing to engage, choosing to fight. Those are powerful choices. And they're choices that we can all make, regardless of our political affiliations or backgrounds.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our shared responsibility to create a more just and equitable world. And it's about believing that even small actions can have a ripple effect that can ultimately lead to meaningful change.
Wow, I'm feeling so much more empowered now than I did at the beginning of this deep dive. It's like we've gone on this journey from despair to hope, from paralysis to action.
That's the power of knowledge, isn't it? It can illuminate the darkness and guide us towards a brighter path.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Knowledge is power, and hope is essential. So, listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the aftermath of the 2024 election. We've explored some challenging topics, but we've also uncovered some powerful insights and strategies for moving forward.
And remember, even though the road ahead may seem long and uncertain, we're not alone in this journey. There are countless others who share our values and are committed to creating a better future. Let's connect with each other. Let's support each other, and let's never stop striving for a world where democracy, justice, and equality prevail.
Stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. Until then, take care of yourselves and keep fighting the good fight.
Okay, so Abramson says we need to rebuild trust in democratic institutions. I mean, after years of attacks and erosion of norms, where do we even begin?
Right. It's a massive undertaking, but Abramson suggests focusing on concrete actions, not just, these abstract ideals.
Yeah.
He talks about transparency and accountability,
Mm.
like pushing for reforms that make government more open, more responsive to
Mm.
the needs of citizens.
Right. Things like campaign finance reform, lobbying restrictions, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Those are the types of policies that can really start to restore people's faith in the system. It's about showing them that government can actually work for them, not just for special interests or the wealthy.
Yeah. I can see how that would be a powerful message.
Yeah.
Especially for people who, feel disillusioned, feel left behind by the system as it is.
Absolutely. And Abramson also emphasizes investing in voter education and mobilization. He argues that a more informed and engaged electorate is just essential for a healthy democracy.
Okay, but how do we reach people who have been, just bombarded with disinformation, people who've lost trust in traditional sources of information?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Abramson suggests that we need to, meet people where they are. We need to use innovative approaches, different platforms to reach voters,
Yeah.
particularly, young people and those who have kind of tuned out of the political process.
Right. So things like social media campaigns,
Yeah.
Targeted outreach programs, maybe even working with influencers or celebrities who have big followings.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of strategies that can cut through all the noise and connect with people on their own terms. It's about making civic engagement more accessible, more appealing, not just a duty, but something that's relevant, that matters to their lives.
I really like that framing. It's about showing people that their voices do matter, that they can actually make a difference.
And finally, Abramson, he really stresses developing, more effective messaging that actually resonates with people's anxieties, their emotions. He argues Democrats need to, move beyond just those wonky policy debates and connect with voters on a much deeper level.
I think you touched on this earlier. It's about speaking to people's hearts, not just their heads.
Exactly. It's about understanding the hopes, the fear, the aspirations that are driving voter behavior, and then crafting messages that speak to those emotions.
So it's not just about, what we say, but how we say it.
Right. It's about how we frame our arguments, how we make them relatable, compelling. It's about telling stories that connect with people's experiences, their lived experiences, and offer a vision of a better future.
Yeah, it's like we need to become better storytellers. We need to paint a picture of a future that people can believe in, that they can get excited about.
That's a great way to put it. We need to offer a narrative of hope, of progress, a narrative that resonates with their deepest values and inspires them to take action.
Okay, I'm getting it. But I got to be honest, I'm still feeling a little overwhelmed. This all sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it's also incredibly, incredibly important work. And it's work that we can all be a part of. We can all be part of the solution.
So where do we start? What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Well, we start by, educating ourselves about the issues, engaging in constructive conversations with our friends, our families, our communities. We can support organizations that are doing the work,
Oh,
promoting democracy, combating disinformation. We can volunteer our time, our resources to campaigns, to causes that align with our values. And most importantly, we can't give up hope.
hmm. That's a really powerful message. Never give up hope. Even in the face of adversity, even when things feel bleak, there's always a reason to believe that a better future is possible.
Absolutely. And I think that's the ultimate takeaway from this whole deep dive. We may not be able to control the outcome of every election, but we can control our own actions, our own beliefs. And by choosing hope, by choosing to engage, by choosing to fight for what we believe in, we can make a difference.
I love that. Choosing hope, choosing to engage, choosing to fight. Those are powerful, powerful choices. And they're choices we can all make. It doesn't matter your political affiliation, your background, whatever.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our shared responsibility to create a more just, a more equitable world. And it's about believing that even small actions can have a ripple effect, an effect that can lead to really meaningful change.
Wow, I feel so much more empowered now than I did when we started this deep dive. It's like we went on a journey from despair to hope, from paralysis to action.
That's the power of knowledge. It can illuminate the darkness and guide us toward a brighter path.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Knowledge is power. Hope is essential.
Mm.
So, listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We explore the aftermath of the 2024 election. It's been a challenging conversation, but we've also, we've uncovered some powerful
Yeah.
insights and strategies for moving forward.
Yeah, and remember, even though the road ahead might seem long, might seem uncertain, you're not alone. There are so many others out there who share your values, who are committed to creating a better future. So let's connect with each other, let's support each other, and let's never stop striving for a world where democracy, where justice, where equality prevail.
Yes. Stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the forces that are shaping our world. But until then, take care of yourselves and keep fighting the good fight.